Isn't it amazing how our memories and our perspectives about our lives evolve through the years? Nothing really changes, but things can look very different. When I was growing up, my dad was just my dad. He did dad things. He got up and went to work early every morning. He worked at a carbon paper company as vice president in charge of production, and he worked really hard there. At the end of the day, we would see him come back home, down the driveway and in the back door. He'd walk straight through the kitchen where my mom was cooking and head down the hall to get cleaned up and ready for dinner. We had dinner together as a family every night, with my dad sitting at the head of the table. On the weekends, he loved to work outside in the yard. My dad loved to garden. He would go out and stay out all day until he was exhausted. He'd come back in, his t-shirt would be soaked, and he'd have sweat dripping off of his brow. That's what he loved to do. To say my dad was a man of few words would be an understatement. He would sometimes go a day or two without really speaking to the family. It wasn't because he didn't love us or he didn't like us. We never had any doubt about that. I think he was just so deep in thought, and he worried a lot about taking care of our family. Over the 37 years that he and I had together, we may have had a handful of one-on-one conversations, and I think I can remember each one. That was my dad. He was a quiet, hard-working man that loved to garden and loved his family. Over the years, those memories have remained, but I now see things I didn't see before. I realize for a man of very few words, he actually told me a lot about life, and he taught me by example. In those few conversations that we had, he left me with words that have inspired me and instilled the values that I live my life by. He told me one day, when you get older, family is what's going to be important to you. He also added that I should have a lot of kids. I only had one daughter, but he was right about family. My family and the time that I spend with my family are the things that are most important to me. My parents had 4 children who gave them 7 grandchildren, and now there are 11 great-grandchildren. Even though my mom and dad have passed, they are still the heart that holds our family together. My dad also taught me about taking responsibility for my own life. He was commenting one time on a situation that a friend was in, and he said, "You know, people create about 90% of their own problems." He wasn't being harsh or critical, but he was saying that people make choices, and our choices and actions have consequences. It took me a long time to see that in my own life, but I know it's true, and I can still hear him saying that. My dad exhibited kindness, integrity, and a strong work ethic. The quality that I admired most in my dad, though, was his perseverance. Long before I was born, he was persevering through great adversity. During World War II, my dad, my mom, and my brother were forced by their government to walk away from their home and their belongings in California, along with 120,000 other Japanese Americans. They were relocated to barracks in Arizona, where their food was rationed, their activity was controlled within the barracks, surrounded by armed guards. My dad was interrogated because he answered a question incorrectly on some processing forms. and they questioned his allegiance to the country. At the end of the war, my dad was released so that he could find a job and find a place to live before my mother and my brother were released. He first went to Nebraska, where he picked beets on a farm. He eventually found work in Chicago at a carbon paper company, and that became home for the family for the next 14 years. He was such a dedicated and hard worker that they asked him to transfer to Georgia to open a new facility. He worked there faithfully until they asked him to retire. I never heard my dad complain about the mistreatment he experienced or the internment, and I never heard him express anger or bitterness over it. Maybe that's what he was thinking about all those years. I know he had to have gotten down at times, but he persevered and he made a great life for our family. He was our hero. I remember one day I asked him for some advice, and he told me, "It doesn't matter what I say. You're not going to listen, and you're going to do what you want to do." I guess I was stubborn. So today, Dad, I want to say, I heard you. I was listening, even when you weren't speaking. Some of the qualities that I am most proud of in myself are actually gifts from you, and I am forever grateful.